What's up, everyone? It's been a while since I've done much videos at all recently. I've mostly just been doing the meta updates, and I recently put out a video on the West Coast Warbands, which, if you're interested in seeing how that went, go ahead and check that out. I think it's my most recent video. However, I've been applying for jobs for a long time, and I still haven't found anything. Every single time we get another layoff, it's like, make me want to it's making me very frustrated. So in the meantime, I decided that instead of making myself frustrated by browsing through job boards, I wanted to instead put out a video that will make you frustrated by making a matchup tier list compass thing, whatever. Even just by looking at this, you can probably tell that I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently than what we normally see in like the matchup tier lists. I've said for a long time, I don't think that tier lists tell me all that much about what is on the tier list as much as it tells me more about the person who's making the tier list than anything else. And by making my tier list this way, I think that tells you a lot about me. For whatever reason, basically, instead of just doing a straight good matchup versus bad matchup, I am going to be breaking it down into two different axes. So the one that you're used to seeing, favored, unfavored, the higher it is on here. So oh, let me send this thing to the back. There we go. So like Eldar, if I were to put something here, it would be a favored matchup. If I put something down here, it would be an unfavored matchup, as we are all very used to seeing. However, the other thing that you can see on this is stable versus unstable. So a matchup that is dead center is going to be something that is basically a draw, and it's, middling how stable it is. You can fairly reasonably say it's going to be a draw, but it might be a 12, it might be an 8, so you're going to have to make sure you actually play it. The flip side of this is if it is a draw and is all the way to the right here, that means it is usually going to be a draw, and there's basically nothing you can do about it. It is going to be a draw. Whereas on the flip side, if it's like favored but over here on the far left, this is basically saying it's probably a draw, but who knows? It could be somebody could blow one player up, but the other person could also very easily blow the other player out. And because guard is inherently a pretty stable army, imagine I'm going to push everything a little bit to the left, right? Guard plays very stably, so I would not be super surprised if, everything just kind of ended up on this side of the right. So I'm going to just push everything a little bit towards the unstable side. Just kind of keep that in mind as you are watching this. This is going to be done from the perspective of well, it's obviously my perspective, but it's also going to be done from the perspective of an above average player on both sides. It's not going to be really targeted at like the top of the top players, because the game changes when you're playing like really top players. You're playing like two people who are consistently going to be threatening to podium at an event. The way that they play the game is going to be different than your 3-2, 2-3 players who are going to be playing the same thing. So we're going to be targeting mostly like, if you were playing this, if you have like two people who are normally going to be about 3-2 at most GTs, this is going to be targeted for like that level of play. One other thing before I get in, this is mostly for fun. I haven't really put a ton of thought about this beforehand, so we'll just kind of go through it. I have sorted things into the different kinds of things. Oh, the one other thing is, I will be doing it from the perspective right now of playing Grizzled Company, not really looking at it from Combined or Bridgehead or Hammer of the Emperor or anything like that. It's going to be Grizzled, and we'll give a brief overview of maybe a couple thoughts on some different detachments that our opponents are going to be playing. And honestly, if I did this for every detachment in the game, this would take a very long time. So we're going to try and keep it. We're going to try and keep it to about an hour, and then go from there. With that in mind, we will be talking about the game as it currently stands. So Grizzled just took a small nerf where we have the reroll ones to wound removed from Grizzled Company, but there have not been any changes to Necrons at this time. So this is at the peak of Necron power, and then we can kind of go from there. Just remember, this is all just my opinion. This is things that I think. Maybe you have better things. I know it's very real for people to have mental blocks against like certain factions, where it's just like, hey, for whatever reason, I just can't beat this faction, right? Like I got trauma from playing against like my buddy when we were first learning to play, and then for whatever reason I just have like this mental block. Clearly, warp spiders are too OP, and we can't do anything about it. So just kind of keep that in mind. Just a journal thing. Again, not targeted at the top of the top, but for most people who are going to be playing an event, skewed a little bit, so that, like both players have a pretty decent idea of how to play the game, but they aren't necessarily going to be likely threatening to win. Uh, Last thing, Grizzled is very strong right now. So realistically, I don't think there's going to be a ton that is going to be in the bottom half. However, I am going to like just as we are shifting everything towards the unstable side of this, we're going to be putting things a little bit closer to unfavored than you might expect, just so that there is some stratification. Because if everything is in the top half of the matrix that we have here, then it's not as interesting. So actually, let's go ahead and do this. Instead of unfavored, we're going to go ahead and change this to less favored. Just give us some opportunities. Because realistically, I don't think there's really anything in the game that is being commonly played that is something that Grizzled is unfavored into. So just kind of keep that in mind. If it is below about Actually, let's go ahead and give an example right away. So the first one that I kind of want to start with off of this in order to kind of showcase this is I'm going to go ahead and take Gene Stealer Cults. And Gene Stealer Cults they've got a couple of builds right now. I've been seeing a couple of Host of Ascension players. I've been seeing like a couple of you see like a little bit of Outlander Claw, a little bit of Final Day. But the one that probably gives Guard one of the biggest headaches right now is Biosanctic GSC. And I know a lot of people are generally going to struggle with playing up against Biosanctic GSC because if they deploy first and they go first and suddenly they have a unit of aberrants just in your face at the very beginning of the game, it can make things very annoying to deal with, and not every player can really deal with this. It becomes easier if you have Bulgrin in your list. It becomes easier if you have Nork Deadog in your list, who can kind of fight his way through some of these armies, or like the Cast on Bricks where you can fall back and shoot. But in general, this is definitely one of the armies that I think is a little bit tougher for Guard to play right now, and it might be Biosanctic GSC might be the most common matchup that we are seeing that is, I think, genuinely just like not super easy for us to play against. And so, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start Gene Stealer Cults down here. I do think it is very flippy because if you win the Defender roll off and you win the Go First roll off, you can just kill so many GSC models. But I think in general, for most people who haven't figured out how to break the jails super effectively, I do think this is one of the ones that is, it's relatively unstable because it requires winning defender so you can get some infiltrators, or going first, so it is just kind of a coin flip as to whether or not you are going to be having that kind of control. But in general, I think with that in mind, Gene Stealer Cults is one that is one of our more difficult matchups. Realistically, like if I was doing this just straight, I would probably put it like here, where it's like it's slightly tipped towards us, but it's also very, very unstable. So I'm gonna go ahead and end up putting it here for us. Again, as a reminder, Guard very strong. We can kind of play up against anything. Next one, I'm just going to kind of go from here. I'm just going to go kind of across the top. Death Guard. Death Guard is an army where they have a couple of small variants. It's mostly going to be Virulent Victorum, where you'll get like 2 Death Shroud Terminators. Sometimes you'll see Mortarion. Sometimes you'll see some Plague Marine Brick. You'll usually see like the Lord of Virulence, I think it's called, the one that points and gives you rerolls on all of your blast dudes, and like 3 of the bloat drones, maybe some Myphitic Blight Haulers, maybe some Chaos Spawn, some Poxwalkers, all of that. This one I think is actually relatively favored for Guard in general, and it's just a matchup where when Death Guard was really good, the problem that we were having with it was not that we didn't like line up well into it. We've actually got really good profiles to be killing the Blight Haulers. We've got really good profiles to be killing the Plague Marines. We've got okay profiles to be killing the Death Shroud Terminators. But the problem that we used to have was that it was just way too much stuff in general. the instability from this matchup tends to come from the fact that they're just trying to hit some 6-inch charges. But if we just assume that they are going to hit the 6-inch charges, it ends up becoming a lot less unstable. And we end up just in a position where, as long as we understand how to deal with the Death Shroud Terminators, it ends up not being that difficult for us to play. So I actually am going to put Death Guard over here. It's fairly stable. I actually think this is one of the more stable matchups. It's not hugely favored for a lot of guard players because you do have to be a little bit careful. Your Bulgrin will get Overwatch. You're going to lose a unit of Engineers or something to Overwatch. But as long as you're playing around their relatively decent Flamer Overwatches, it should be relatively favored, relatively stable for us. So it forces our opponent to go for some long charge in order to try and make that a little bit worse. World Eaters. World Eaters is an interesting one because this is one where a lot of people kind of underestimate how effective Berserkers really are into Bulgrin because they're going to be swinging at you with, I think it's like 40 attacks with probably sustained and dev wounds. So they actually can chip their way through units of 6 Bulgrin much more effectively than a lot of people think. However, the Bulgrin are incredibly powerful against 8-bound. They're really good against Angron. They're pretty decent against Chaos Spawn. And they really stop a lot of the things that World Eaters want to do. So if it's like a lot of Berserkers, you really only see this in Berserker Warband ever. So like really heavy Berserker builds can be a little bit tough for some variants of what we're seeing in Grizzle Company. But in general, it's an army where we don't have too many issues with like playing against them straight away. So I definitely think this is like favored. I don't think it's as favored as the Death Guard matchup is, just because Death Guard don't really have tools a lot of the time. And one of the big things about playing into World Eaters that you have to be very careful about is their ability to 6-inch pile and consolidate, so that it is very easy to make mistakes. And if you play up against World Eaters and you make some small positioning mistakes, it ends up becoming really, really difficult very, very quickly when they just start touching all of the things in our army. So as you get better at understanding like how to move your models around, how to move your opponent's models around by limiting what pile and consolidate they have available to them, by limiting their ability to like walk between different models, it ends up becoming easier to play against. However, I don't think this is something that a lot of people at like the 3-2 level do particularly well. And because of that, if you make some of these small mistakes, you will end up finding yourself in a less stable game where if you make those small mistakes, it can be catastrophically bad. So for that reason, I'm going to move it a little bit more towards that direction. I'm going to move it towards the unstable side of the matchup. However, I am going to, with this in mind, I think Death Guard is probably a little bit easier for us, and therefore we're going to go ahead and move World Leaders up just a little bit. Because I do think it is definitely, if both World Leaders are playing perfectly, I actually think that like this is like really easy and really easy and really stable. But I think for most people who are going to be making some of those small mistakes, it ends up becoming not as easy to play and more unstable because of it. Next, let's go ahead and talk about Thousand Suns. So Thousand Suns is a really interesting army. One of the big things that they've been playing recently is they've been taking units of 10 Scarab Occult Terminators, and they have and Rubricate Phalanx. Sometimes you'll see it in a couple of other things. You still sometimes see Grand Coven floating around. But the Scarab Occult Terminators, they move faster than people expect. I don't remember if they move 5 base or 6 base, but they're oftentimes going to be moving 5, and then in, I think, Rubricate, you can give them Assault for 1 CP, and you can double move them, so it's not uncommon for them to be moving like, you know, you know 11 to like 15 inches or something like that, and then shooting you with a ton of just crazy keywords on all of their abilities. I think it's like lethal hits, full re-rolling. It's like AP2, and you can buff up the AP on like the bolters that they have. So you do have to be relatively careful with the way that you're actually playing up against these Scarab Occult Terminators. You do sometimes have Magnus as well, particularly in Grand Coven, who does become relatively obnoxious to deal with. However, One of the big problems that Thousand Suns has, and what a lot of Marine armies tend to have playing up against Guard, is our profiles line up rather nice into most of their army. We're bringing a lot of plasma, and Marines hate plasma. We have a lot of damage 3, especially playing off of our Rogel Dorn. So as soon as like Scarab Occult Terminators like come out to play and show themselves to a Rogel Dorn, those units tend to evaporate relatively quickly. So it's not ridiculous for us to just bleed them dry very, very fast. Um, I do think that it's, again, keeping in mind that uh, basically everything would be like in the top right corner over here. Can I turn my. Is this capturing my. Uh, oh, it's doing it over here. I understand. So realistically, everything would probably be in this top right corner if I was just doing it just like straight, like no adjustments to it. But I think in general, because of the fact that we are going to be adjusting everything down into the left so that there's actually like more spread out between things, I think Thousand Suns are, it's definitely still favored. And I think it's relatively stable. I think the biggest instability oftentimes come from if your opponent just like rolls a lot of 4-up invuls on their Scarab Occult Terminators or Magnus or something, and then they just don't die, then that can become a little bit of an issue. However, if we just go and kill everything that doesn't have an invul, they run out of stuff pretty quick, and then they're still just like not able to play the board. You kind of do have to pay Magnus his due. You kind of let him do his thing a lot of the time, but you just pick a couple of things. They end up being a relatively expensive army. They don't have that many units, and so as long as we are in a position where we can actually shoot them, we are going to be in a relatively good spot. Okay, Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights is next. I don't respect Chaos Knights very much in general. I don't think this army is all that good. One of the big things to kind of note is that on average, you only really see this army in Infernal Lands. You generally are going to be seeing 2 or 3, usually 3, Chaos Knight Despoilers, so the ones with the double Gatling guns. And then you kind of make some decisions. If you have the 3 of them, you get like 4 War Dogs, and then like a unit of Nurglings and a Beast of Nurgle, or you can go like 3 War Dogs and extra Demons. Usually, if you have the 2 Despoilers, you're going to get like, I think it's like 6 or 7 War Dogs, and then like a couple of Demons, or like 5 War Dogs and some extra Demons. And the big thing about playing up against this army is they can't kill Dorns very effectively at all. Um, if you pop smoke on a Rogel Dorn that every single one of their Night Despoilers is aiming at, it's really, really close to a coin flip as to whether or not the Dorn lives or not. So they have to decide, do I want to put all 3 of my Knights into a Rogel Dorn, fail to kill it, or do I want to be like showing my Knights such that the Rogel Dorns get to shoot first and I could potentially lose them? I think this is a matchup that is relatively stable and pretty good, honestly. Um, it is, yeah, if you have Bulgrin in the list, then you are just charging them into everything all the time. A Despoiler does not shoot its way out consistently, and yeah, I mean the Bulgrin just make it very, very difficult. A Despoiler will kill like 2, maybe 3 Bulgrin on average, so it just takes a lot of work for them to get through that. If you're not playing the Bulgrin builds, you're playing like triple Vanquishers, similar thing. It's going to take, most of the time, it's going to take more than 1 Despoiler to kill a Vanquisher. It's probably going to take all 3 Chaos Knights or all 3 Despoilers to kill a Dorn. Their profiles line up decently well into killing our chaff, but if we're taking a big chaff build, we're also in a spot where that's probably engineers. It's probably Rough Riders, who all have really, really good profiles. So there's always a possibility that our opponent goes sicko mode and just like never fails an invul, but realistically that's unlikely because they're going to be getting like 5-ups. Like one thing might have a 4-up invul, so one thing might be able to scam us. But realistically, I think this is a pretty favored and pretty stable matchup for us. I think it's hard to really, unless we're on like our opponent's board choice where they can run up and just like force the issue immediately, kill all of our chaff right off the bat, I think it's a pretty favored matchup. Next, Chaos Space Marines in general. So it is worth noting, as I say this, I have not played into the new Huron Blackheart or whatever. I have not played into the new Masters and Maelstrom. I have not played into the new Chaos Space Marine detachments. So unfortunately, this is going to be done from the perspective of everything that existed before that, everything that existed before the last couple of days. of updates for all that kind of stuff. Chaos Space Marines, I think, is an army that, just like all the other kinds of Marines, tends to just run out of stuff. Speaking of, I don't have an Emperor's Children on here. Um, we are going to copy this, and you guys get to watch me do this in real time. Let's make this pink. How do I do this? More colors. Pink. All right, there we go. The pink Chaos Space Marines we will use for Emperor's Children. Okay. Chaos Space Marines. So similar to what we've been seeing with a lot of the Knights already, Marines in general, we have really good profiles into a lot of Marines. Marines tend to evaporate if they're going with like Chosen in Creations of Bile or Possessed in Creations of Bile. They just die to Dorns really, really effectively. All of their other stuff like Legionaries will get super overkilled by like a unit of Scions. A unit of Khazar will generally kill like most, like basically all of the Legionaries, and probably do a little bit of damage to the Lord immediately afterwards as well. We are really, really efficient into a lot of Marine profiles. So if they're playing a lot of the normal builds like Creations of Bile or Renegade Raiders is a little bit trickier. But in general, I find this is definitely fairly favored. I don't think it's. I actually think we can move Chaos Knights up a little bit further. I do think it's more favored than our game into Thousand Suns most of the time. Um, what is it? Unstable. I don't know. I think this is more stable than our game into a lot of like Thousand Suns in general. There's just less invuls available. We do have to be a little bit careful about like Accursed Cultist bricks because they can sometimes just go for forever. And in terms of like most of your games, they're going to be playing up against Creations of Bile, Renegade Raiders, and probably the new stuff as well, with the Renegade Warband, I think it's called. This should be relatively stable. We're just so efficient at killing their profiles, so they're going to have to do some weird stuff. One of the things that makes this less stable, speaking of, I think I'm actually going to move Chaos Knights even further. I think it's even more stable than that. One of the things that makes this a little bit less stable is sometimes Legionaries just kill God. They just kill whatever they want because they get like bonus AP. You hit the right dark packs. You just roll a bunch of sixes. Yeah, it's very possible that units that you don't expect to kill your Dorn just will going into Chaos Space Marines. They're really, really good at passing a lot of damage checks. So that's going to be probably where I'm going to be putting Chaos Space Marines. It's fairly stable. It's definitely favored, and then we'll kind of go from there. All right, this next one, this pink one, is going to be representing Emperor's Children, and I think this is probably about the same. I think it's actually more favored than Chaos Space Marines. I'm just going to put it on top of the Chaos Space Marines. It's still relatively stable. Court of the Phoenician does not really scare us at all. Because you just like yeet Fulgrim through, and then you're still going to be putting enough of your army into Fulgrim that he should generally die anyway, even with the -1 to hit. It's a little bit scarier if we fail our fallback check. If he does the passive leadership, it's a little bit scarier there because we can't shoot our blast guns at him. But realistically, we're still going to be shooting like 8+ melt the shots with Melta 2 at Fulgrim, and then it's just a lot of volume, so we will probably kill him relatively consistently. And then the rest of the army, there's just not enough stuff. Noise Marines can't kill Leman Russes, they can't kill Rogel Thorns. The like scout dudes will sometimes pick up some of our chaff, but will very quickly die almost immediately after. So we are very quickly getting to spots where Emperor's Children just doesn't have the sauce. The Winged Demon Princes have to go kind of nutso. They have to go getting like a lot of mortal wounds off on the charge into piling into something else that they didn't charge. So there's not a ton of tools. Is there any instability coming from this matchup? Not really. Like sometimes they just hit a lot of 4-up invuls on like the Demon Princes. That's about it. That's honestly where the biggest instability comes from. Okay, moving on to Space Marine variants, Dark Angels. Dark Angels, I just played this one on stream yesterday. I played it very aggressively. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the 6 YouTube channel. Um, yeah, Dark Angels is generally, you generally see it in Wrath of the Rock is probably their most common detachment. Sometimes you will see it in Gladius. Every now and then you'll see it in Stormlance. Every now and then you'll see it in Company of Hunters, where they just take a ton of like Ravenwing and bikers in general and just kind of run at you and jail you in your own deployment zone. But most of the time you'll see Dark Angels is going to be in Wrath of the Rock, because if you're playing like Company of Hunt, or if you're playing Gladius, you'd probably just be playing Ultramarines. But with that in mind, Dark Angels is an army that I think, again, is relatively favored. I don't think there's a ton of great tools they can. Let's see. Because, like, Deathwing Knights, they just kind of drop in. If you're playing Bulgrin, Deathwing Knights and Bulgrin will just sit there and, like, wail on each other for, like, 3 entire battle rounds. And every single time it can be like, well, our guys are OC2, and you have a maximum OC of 5. So if we have half of our unit left, we can still out OC on this objective. So it makes it a really, really tough brawl for them to get through. Doombolt Guard is like a little bit less favored into this. The triple Vanquisher list is also a little bit less favored than like Bulgrim builds into Dark Angels, just because they have the tools in order to fight it. But we are pretty good at just like killing Deathwing Knights with Vanquishers. Every Melta shot is very plausibly just a dead Deathwing Knight. So it's realistically, it's definitely favored going up. I probably should have changed the axes because I keep wanting to go right for it being good. How stable is it? It's reasonably stable. The big thing that makes this unstable, and you can see this in the game that I played yesterday, is sometimes you shoot at the lion and the lion just rolls every single one of his 3-up invulns. Um, that's probably where the biggest instability comes from, is if they just like make a lot of 4-up invulns. So I do think it's better for us than Thousand Suns, and I also think it's about as stable, because it's like we're getting scammed in similar ways. Suddenly they just have more things alive than we were previously expecting. They don't generally have enough stuff to effectively screen, so Scions do a ton of work in this because they are still mostly marine bodies. We can kill off like Azrael and whatever Azrael's attached to. It's oftentimes Stern Guard or Inner Circle companions. Deathwing Knights are kind of annoying. Like, they are not the best profiles for us to be shooting at. So, it is fairly good there. Okay, Deathwatch. I'm going to be honest, gamers. I have not played against much Deathwatch, and I have definitely not played against Deathwatch being piloted by a very strong opponent. So, my opinion here is going to be a little bit skewed. I generally think of playing up against Deathwatch as relatively similar to playing up against Ravenguard Shadowmark, um, where the big deal that Deathwatch have is it's a lot of toughness 6, but they don't generally have the -1 to hit. So Deathwatch just does drop gun. It is relatively, like, it's harder to kill than we want it to be, and it's been a bit of a problem recently because they have a lot of the, what do they call it? Desolation Marines, I think, where they have like the indirect and they can pick up a lot of our chaff. So I actually think that this is one where, again, if I was doing this like purely just like on where it would be, it'd probably be like here. But because we are stretching it out, I'm going to put it slightly below. I do think that this is a matchup that you do have to play pretty well, from mostly just like watching the game, because they can kind of go wherever. They do a ton of damage, and they are more durable than a lot of people are generally going to be thinking they are, so you can't undercommit into them. One of the things that Deathwatch really tends to hate is transports. So if you're playing a lot of these traditional like triple Chimera or 2 Chimera and a Taurox or 3 Tauroxes, uh, they can kill the transport really easily, but killing the guys inside afterwards is not always going to be the easiest thing. They're going to be really relying on that indirect that they can provide. So I don't think that this is a matchup that usually, like, if you're going to be hitting a Deathwatch player, it's probably going to be a pretty good Deathwatch player. And so for that reason, I think it's less stable, just because it's harder, like, it's easier to make mistakes. I think that's probably the best way to think about this, is if you are going to be how small of mistakes are going to get punished on both sides, and I do think that Deathwatch is going to punish us a decent amount for relatively small mistakes. Like we let a spot open in our screening, and we can lose pieces we suddenly don't expect to. So Deathwatch probably going to be there. Chaos Demons next. So Chaos Demons is an interesting army right now. You do see by far the most common build is going to be Scintillating Legion. They did get a nerf, kind of, that is also kind of a buff. So it didn't really change because the Infernal Puppeteer, you need line of sight to the things, which is not really that big of a deal. And it also lets you target low knobs by using the measurement from like the screamers that are going to be running around us at the same time. Um, that build, if you are playing Bolgrin, is really tough for us to generally play against. We are going to be the ones that kind of rely on scamming our opponent, but we also are losing out on the opportunity for going for easy chargers because our opponent is oftentimes really fast. Especially because if we tag them in melee, they just be like, I don't want to be in melee anymore. They can pick themselves up out of the melee with Bolgrin for a CP and a flux token. So we can't really pin them down. They have pretty decent profiles into us, and it is kind of hard for us to expose our Rogaldorns against them because of how much damage it generally does. Other one is the 5 greater demons that you sometimes see in demonic incursion. So this is oftentimes going to be like Guo, Rotigus, oftentimes like one bird, Bellicor, and like Scarbrand or a Bloodthirster, and then you'll fill with whatever like corn dogs and like pox, not poxwalkers, plague bears, stuff like that. That one is relatively easy for us to play against because we can consistently out OC them. The fact that they are just OC5 and all the greater demons ends up creating a lot of problems for our opponent because we can just put like 5 engineers. They can kill 2 of them, and we can be like, well, we're still OC6 because we have duty and honor. But so this is going to be mostly in relation to uh, playing up against Scintillating Legion. And I actually think that this one is a relatively unstable game against them, simply because they have the flux token, so they can make a lot more 4-up invulns than we might expect. A lot of guard builds are not bringing that much volume, especially if you're playing like double Thorn, triple Vanquisher, or double Thorn, 12 Bulgrin. You generally don't really have the volume to force your opponent to eventually fail some saves. And if you're shooting like a Vanquisher at the D6 plus 6 gun into a big bird, they'll be like, well, okay, I failed it. Here's a flux token. I'll flip another coin. Oh no, the second one was heads. Well, I didn't take any damage. So it ends up becoming relatively unstable. And I do think that this is one that can go. It's honestly pretty balanced, one way or the other, and you just kind of have to force your opponent to play the game with you relatively quickly. You actually have to play relatively aggressively into those builds, especially if you're playing with Bulgrin or something like that. Okay, so I think that's one of the ones that is a little bit harder for us to play. Next, let's go ahead and go to Space Marines, and by Space Marines, this basically just means Ultramarines. You don't really see any Raven Guard anymore. You sometimes see Salamanders here and there. Imperial Fisk isn't real, it can't hurt you. What else is there? Oh, the White Scars? Seems okay. Imperial Fist is, they're all like okay. The biggest thing is they're all suppressed because none of them have Victrix Guard, none of them have Marnia's Calguard, none of them have Gilliman. So this is definitely one where it ends up being it's mostly just Ultramarines, realistically. And I think Ultramarines is an army where our profiles line up less well into Ultramarines, because like the Vindicator is kind of an awkward profile for us to kill. We only have a small handful of guns that are more than uh, strength 11, so it's like the Oppressor Cannon and then the Vanquisher Cannon and then like a couple of las cannons that we have around. So it is like Vindicators are kind of awkward for us to kill. Their Pulsar Executioners do actually beat up on Thorns at long range because they're going to be winning a lot of the long range duels because they are also toughness 12. So it's not the easiest thing for us to like take long range duels against us. But into Vindicators, at the very least, we can get relatively close to them because they are slow moving. They only move 9, but they usually have access to like advance and shoot. And the other thing that they are generally going to be missing is they don't really have a ton of other guns. So like Vindicators they really want to shoot at like one big target, which our Dorns are generally going to be just presenting. So going up against Vindicators, it's a little bit better for us. Going up against Repulsor Executioners, it's a little bit worse for us. The change from Victrix being 4 wounds to 3 wounds does make it quite a bit better for us. So I'm actually going to put this. I don't think. Again, everything is shifted down and to the left from where it normally would be. I think this is relatively stable. The biggest instability comes from sometimes a Vindicator is just going to kill a Rogel Dorn because you pop Storm of Fire, it's suddenly AP 4 ignoring cover, I think. So we're generally going to be saving it on like 5 ups or 6 ups, and then if we Armor of Contempt, it's going to be saving on 5 ups. So it's mostly going to be depending on like how many shots they actually get because they're going to be hitting on 3s, rerolling, wounding on 2s. So it's if they roll 9 shots, then it's very possible we could just die. Other than that, though, I think it's relatively stable. You do have to be careful that you are not going to be giving up weird reactive into Blood Surge into the Victrix, but there are lots of tools to play around that, making them surge into a Vindicator, making them surge into Bulgrin, making them surge into like a Chimera that has Kazarkin inside so you can still shoot the Chimera at it, or the Vanquisher, or a Hellhound or something. There's still a lot of tools available to us, so I do think this one, relative to a lot of the other matchups that are currently out there, it's one of the more difficult ones, but it's not that unstable most of the time. They just generally don't have a ton of things, and we kind of assume that every time one of us activates, the thing that is getting shot at is usually just going to be dead. So there's not like a ton of opportunities for either side to really do a ton of scamming. Okay, next, Space Wolves. Space Wolves is generally, you see a couple of builds, but they have all kind of coalesced into, you're going to be taking Wolfguard Terminators, which are like T5, -1 to wound against strength greater than toughness, and 4 wounds for the most part. So they're really obnoxious to get rid of because we don't have great profiles into killing them. And then you will oftentimes have some Thunderwolf Cav, which are also like 4 wounds, 4 up invul. There's just a lot of like toughness scamming and a lot of invul scamming, so it ends up becoming a relatively like unstable game. I'll into them quite a bit, so it's definitely going to be over on this side to the left somewhere. But is it favored? I definitely think the math tends to favor us, but I don't think it tends to favor us as much as it does into World Eaters. So I think I'm going to go ahead and put it here. It is the kind of game where sometimes, like most of the time, we do have the damage to get through the Wolfguard Terminators. We do have the damage to get through the Thunderwolf Cavalry. But because sometimes they just never fail an invul save, it can become relatively unstable. The other big source of instability in this matchup is the fact that a lot of like Space Wolf Stormwolf builds, if they go first and they jail you correctly, there's not a ton to do, right? You could just don't really have an opportunity to get past them if they are moving in the correct ways. You'll oftentimes have to sacrifice a lot more material than you want to in order to get to the midboard. And that can be a really, really tough position for us to try and get through. So because of that, I do think it is favored. I'm actually going to move World Eaters and Thousand Suns up a ton so that we can get a little bit more room here to push the Space Wolves up just a nudge. So yeah, Space Wolves in general, it is, it's not the easiest matchup in the world for us. It is definitely favored, but it can be very, very unstable, especially for most like normal guard builds, because sometimes you just get scammed by 4-up invuls. Okay, next, Black Templars. So Black Templars is an interesting one for us. On the one hand, just like a lot of other Marines, we kill their dudes incredibly efficiently. The one scary thing that they really have is the full re-rolling Repulsor Executioners. As long as they have like another Black Templar unit, I think it's like within 12 and they don't even need line of sight. It's very easy for them to do that. However, a single Repulsor Executioner is still not supposed to kill a Dorn, so they generally will need to get like 2 of these Repulsor Executioners, and because of that, it ends up becoming relatively stable, and I think in general, it's not that tough for us to kill their stuff. And they also just tend to kind of run out of stuff relatively quickly. The new Bastion new Bastion Task Force stuff that Innis has been trying, um, just kind of loses to Bulgrin. You show a bunch of stuff, they slide them into Bulgrin. They maybe kill them because they have a huge volume of like damage 1 attacks, but they still die to Dorns, they still die to Khazarkin, they still die to Scions. And then as long as we're creating enough space for us like that, we should be in a pretty good spot. Blood Angels. Blood Angels is interesting because Rage Curse Onslaught is it's a lot more damage. I think a lot of people when they were looking at Rage Curse Onslaught looked at it and said, "This looks like Liberator Assault Group, but kind of worse." And then they actually like played it for the first time. And they go, "Oh, full rerolling Death Company with reroll ones to wound is a lot of attacks, with very very high conversion rate, and it's just a lot." And then one of them is like -1 damage. I think that one also has like a 6 up Feel No Pain, and you can give them Fight on Death, and you can give them one of them has like fights first, so it's really, really, really good into a lot of other melee armies because you have so much fight phase manipulation. You have the fight first, and then you also have the what do you call it? Um, Fight on Death. That's what it's called, and it's an auto fight on death. However, we are not really a melee army, and one of the big things about like these Death Company bricks and the Sanguinary Guard bricks is they they tend to trade down into guard a lot. Are just relatively expensive. You're going to be sending like a Death Company brick into like a Vanquisher or like a Chimera, and then we're going to get the guys out, and then we're still going to kill them with Rogel Dorns. Um, and sometimes they just have to slam like a unit that they don't want to, like the Sanguinary Guard. It's going to go have to kill like Krieg Engineers, which are 60 points and very difficult for our opponent to deal with. So they don't even have like that many great ways to be scamming us. They don't have that many 4-up invuls. It's mostly just a lot of marine bodies that we have to chew our way through, which generally means that it's relatively stable. And it's also like it's not that it's if I have Ultramarines there, I'm gonna go ahead and downgrade this one just a little bit. It's relatively stable, because we are really, really good at moving our opponent's stuff around. And as long as we are respecting their threat ranges, we are generally going to be having a lot of control over what it is that our opponents can hit. And then killing Marines is what the guard does. It is so, so good at it. Imperial Knights. Okay, Imperial Knights right now is another army that I think it is kind of difficult for guard to lose to. It is they're a bit more what do you call it? There's a bit more variation in builds in Imperial Knights than you see in Chaos Knights, because Chaos Knights just like take 2 or 3 despoilers and fill with War Dogs and maybe some demons. Imperial Knights, you more often tend to see like 2 bigs and then like 6 or 7 armigers. And then sometimes you'll see like 4 bigs. I played against an army that was 5 bigs. It was double Atropos, triple Lancer this last weekend. And the thing is, they don't have great answers for Bulgrin. They don't have great answers for Khazarkin. They don't have great answers for Engineers. They do have some answers for Rogel Thorns, which is like whatever knight it is that has the Volcano Lance, and then you have like the Macroplasma Battery or whatever. So those things are a little bit sketchy into what we have, but they generally just don't have the activation count to deal with everything that guard has. So this one it is relatively stable. I don't think it's as stable as the Chaos Knights one, just because there are some builds that Imperial Knights have that is like harder to kill, like if they have the defenders or whatever, the one that gives you the -1 damage all around. But it is relatively about as good as Chaos Knights. I don't think it's because they do have some variation in builds. I'm gonna go ahead and put Imperial Knights not quite as good and not quite as stable as our matchup into Chaos Knights, but it is still pretty darn good. Okay. All right, we're about halfway through. We're a little bit more than halfway through. Let's go ahead and talk about Sisters next. Adepta Sororitas is an interesting one. They recently took some nerfs, and we didn't take any nerfs, and we got a better detachment into Adepta Sororitas than the one that we had previously, because Combined Arms was not as good into Sisters as Grizzle Company is, because just having those reroll ones, we don't generally struggle to kill most things in the army other than what do you call it? The Sacrosanct bricks, and the reroll ones to hit for free on all of our units does improve the damage that we have coming out from our Rogel Thorns into those targets. It's about the same for a lot of our infantry bricks. In a lot of context, because we don't really worry about the wound roll quite as much into this army. Um, However, there are some things that we do have to be very careful of. The Morven Vol unit with the Paragon War Suits that's +1 to hit and wound and re-rolling all hits and wounds can just kill Rogel Thorns really, really efficiently. You pair it with an Immolator for the Ignore Cover, you pair it with a Castigator for the +1 AP, and suddenly I think it's like 6 Melta shots with +1 to hit and wound, re-rolling all hits, re-rolling all wounds, and every failed save is just straight damage. And then you get like a miracle die. So one of those you are very confident is going to be like, well, plug in a 6. It's just flat 6 on a lot of these Meltas. So it's not. But the big thing about that unit is it's pretty easy to pre-measure where it's going, especially if it starts on the board. So it's not hard to kind of stay away from that unit, and we can still like Overwatch it, and it's not ridiculous to kill like one of the Paragon suits in an Overwatch, just because we have a lot of volume of good quality shooting. So this is definitely one that I think. Ooh, how stable is it? It's fairly stable. I think it's probably in here. One of the big things about the sisters is that it's not. They do a lot of the same things that we kind of want to do, in that they're generally playing a combined arms. They're generally going to be stacking buffs into a single target. They're generally going to be trading a lot of relatively small pieces, but a lot of the time between Champions of Faith, they are relatively quick, and in Hallowed Martyrs, they end up doing way more damage per like data sheet towards the end of the game. Um, so I think it's slightly favored. I think I'm gonna end up putting it right about here, where they do have a lot of invuls, and because you can just get scammed by Sacrosanct units. With the 4-up invul, 5-up feel no pain, and -1 to wound, they end up being like sometimes the dice just doesn't go in your favor, but I do think it is a slightly better matchup for us than a lot of other things. Okay, Custodes. So big thing about Custodes right now is there's a couple of different builds against a lot of our traditional like shield host builds or traditional talent or Lions of the Emperor. Lions? I think it's Lions that gives you the +1 to hit and wound if you don't have anybody nearby. Those builds are probably like here is what I'm going to end up saying. We're going to be go ahead and moving them to the frontier. But the other big problem that we have is the triple Land Raider and a ton of Custodian Guard. And that build is, according to people like Nassim Fouchain, and several other players in the UK in particular, they say it is the worst matchup in the game for guard. Simply because there's a lot of tools, you have to really understand the matchup quite well, and I still have yet to play the matchup, so I kind of have to rely on what they're saying. And I think if you were to play up against the Talon's triple Land Raider build the first time, it's going to be really, really tough. But the other big thing is it's not going to be super stable either. Um, I think so. Going off of that, I'm mostly just letting other people determine my opinion on this one a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put Custodes in particular with the triple Land Raider build down here. Everything else is going to be like up here where it's relatively stable, or it's still not super stable because you can get Warden scammed. But it's not going to be that bad. We're going to go ahead and put Custodes over here next to Gene Stealer Cults. Grey Knights. I don't think we can lose to Grey Knights, to be honest. So the big thing about playing up against Grey Knights is they have a couple of tricks. They have, I don't remember what the new detachment calls it, but it's Miss of Deimos, where as soon as you make a fallback move or make a move near them, they go back into reserves, and then they can rapid ingress in the same turn. We do have to be a little bit careful about that, but the biggest problem that they have is they can't kill our tanks. They have decent volume, but they also really, really hate transports. And we have good tanks, we have good transports, and the Nemesis Dread Knights and the Grandmasters are like toughness 9. So we just ask them to make so many saves. They're also vehicles. They don't have that many attacks. They don't punch their way out of Bulgrin very effectively. They can kill, not the Nemesis Dread Knights, but like the Purifiers, will kill Bulgrin reasonably efficiently. But in general, they don't have very many things, and their things die to us really, really easily. Um, you can get 4-up invul save, but it's like not that common. I'm gonna go ahead and throw Grey Knights. This might be like here. I'm gonna put them in a spot partly where you can see them a little bit better over next to Death Guard. Okay, Drukhari. Drukhari only. Oh, hold on. We still have more Imperial factions to do. Adeptus Mechanicus. So Adeptus Mechanicus is an interesting one. This one was, I would have said, like a couple of months ago, this was one of the hardest matchups in the game for Guard because they were doing a lot of the things that we wanted to do, but they had more cheaper stuff, and their cheaper stuff traded into our cheap stuff really, really efficiently. However, a lot of those things have gone up in points. They've lost several chickens, like Laz chickens. They don't have nearly as many bats. They don't have nearly as many Sakara and Ruststalkers or Infiltrators. And so this matchup was pretty tough before. I think it is, I think it's a relatively good matchup for us. Sorry. I think it's not super favored, but it is relatively stable. They kind of have to go for like long charges. And the only real instability from this comes from the fact that sometimes last chickens just go nuts when you pop like the crit fives, and you get each last chicken normally has like 2 shots. If they each get like 4, and suddenly you just have like 2 last chickens hitting you with like 8 las cannons that are twin linked, suddenly that can become a real problem. I remember no, I was playing a game into my buddy's Admech, and he popped the crit 5 strat. No, he didn't even pop the crit 5 strat. He was playing chickens. I shot the chickens. I killed the first chicken and the second chicken down to 1 wound. So it was just 1 chicken. That 1 chicken shot me back and just top to bottom killed the Dorn. Because he got like 3 hits, 3 wounds. I failed every single save. And then I just died. So that was pretty funny, as he just rolled maximum damage. So there is like a little bit of instability in this matchup, but now that they have lost a lot of their like extra stuff, it's still relatively stable for us. Okay. Oh, do I still have one more? I do. Imperial Agents. I'm gonna be honest, I've never played this matchup. I don't know if I ever will. Um, I don't know. What do they do? They have a lot of T3 bodies, 4 pinvals. They kind of scam you. I don't know. The fact that they're toughness 3 means that our lasguns are really, really relevant in these matchups, and we don't have like a lack of volume. I don't know. I don't think this might be like, as somebody who has never played against the army, I'm going to guess it is very favored and pretty stable. Because like our lasguns are just so good. Our stubbers are really good. Our flamers are really good. We can kind of match them with just like the amount of stuff that we put on the board. So like I guess there's like the one build that you can do that's like 3 units of like Deathwing kill or Deathwatch kill teams that just like all infiltrate. That one is really wonky. I don't know. Let's move on. Imperial Agents I don't think is a real faction. Okay. Next, Drukhari. So Drukhari is an army that really only has one they really only have one build that is really seeing play. You'll see a little bit of Reaper's Wager, you'll see a little bit of the Cabalite Cartel, but unless you're named exactly like Ridvan Scary Martinez, you don't really see anything else other than Spectacle of Spite. I think basically everybody's playing Spectacle, and Spectacle is an army that is mostly a knowledge check, and do you understand what they are doing? Because there's a couple of key things to this. One, we kill them very efficiently. All their stuff just dies. 2, they end up going really, really fast and have like a lot of OC denial. But as long as we are setting ourselves up such that the OC denial is actually a lot harder, because we can be like, okay, cool, you put like these 3 bikes for 6 OC, but I have 4 engineers, which is secretly 8 OC on the objective. That can be really difficult for them to deal with. The other really big thing is a challenge met. There's a couple of really important limiters in how you're actually going to be using it. The first one is that you cannot challenge Met into things that fell back, right? So if they charged in and tagged you, you can fall that unit back and not worry about getting charged. The second part of that is they can only charge one thing. So if they have like their witches here, and you have like a unit here, if you put something here, they have to charge over that in order to like tag the thing on the other side of it. The other thing that we can deal with is the fact that we have a lot of firing deck and like big guns never tire. So if you give them like, you have like some witches or whatever, and then you have your vanquisher, and then they're like, I'm going to charge into the vanquisher, and you go, cool, here's 3 heavy flamers, whoosh, right, and you'll kill a decent chunk of the unit there. They have to understand all of these things. We have to understand all of these things. We have to be less afraid of challenge met than a lot of other armies have to. The Bulgrin builds don't like it, but everything else, they struggle to deal with chimeras. They will never really get to shoot at Dorns. Like, you might get a couple of Scourgers that will pop off. We saw this recently in Andre Gorin versus, I don't remember who he played against, but it was Andre Gorin playing on War Games Live, I think it was, where he just like lost to Dorn to like only a couple of Scourges. So this is a matchup that is relatively unstable, I think, especially if you're playing Bulgrin. Actually, no, I think it's very stable because we almost never get like scammed on anything. Sometimes they make like really funny charges, but other than that, it's mostly just a movement-based game and understanding what the movement on both sides can really be. Um, so it ends up being pretty stable. So it's definitely relatively stable. I think for Bulgrin builds, it's probably like, I think this is one of the toughest matchups if you have Bulgrin. But if you don't have Bulgrin and you're playing like Vanquishers or Doombolt or something like that, hmm. I think because it is like decently good into the Vanquisher build, it's decently good into the Bulgrin build, it's not great into the Doombolt build. I think Spectacle of Spite for most players it's probably like slightly unfavored and also very stable. Because everything, again, everything just kind of dies on both sides of the board, and it's just movement. There's only real instability is going to be coming in from the fact that sometimes one of us is going to make a really long charge one way or the other. Okay, Tyranids. Tyranids definitely favored. Let's go ahead and bring this to the front so we can put it on top of things. It's probably, is it more favored than Thousand Suns? Yeah, it's probably like here, to be entirely honest. Like, it's fairly stable. The biggest source of instability is generally going to be coming in from, uh, what do you call it? Shadow in the Warp, or sometimes we just lose. We'll usually lose like 5 primary against Shadow in the Warp, but sometimes we'll lose 10 primary, which is a lot. And then every now and then, like, a Tyrannofex just goes sicko mode. However, the odds of a Tyrannofex even killing a Lehman Russ, as long as a Tyrannofex has to move like at all, is really really low because they have to get both shots through. Or they have to like hit both shots, and as long as we are making the move, they're going to be hitting on 3s. If we smoke, they're going to be hitting on 4s. Sometimes they're going to be rerolling 1s to wound or 1s to hit, and then they need to wound both of them on 3s. So even just wounding both of them happens less than half the time, right? Because 2/3 times 2/3 will give you 4 out of 9. So like only 44% of the time do they even wound both shots, and then we do get saves because it's like AP4, so we're still getting like 5-ups. So realistically, they just don't kill our stuff very effectively. Exocrines don't kill tanks at all. They even don't consistently kill like chimeras. They just aren't killing the things that they need to, basically at all. Sometimes you can get scammed by like a Norn or something, so maybe it's like a little bit less stable. We'll go ahead and move it over here. Um, and again, I'm going to say this a third or fourth time at this point. We are stretching everything out because realistically, everything probably goes, maybe slightly outside of this blue box, but we're stretching everything out. So I'm going to go ahead and stretch it a little bit further to the left, where it's not the most stable thing in the world. There are a couple opportunities for them to scam us, but realistically, it's not terribly unstable for us to play up against. Yeah. Where's my mouse? There it is. Okay, Necrons, the one that everybody's excited about. Okay, Necrons is let's just talk about it right off the bat. It is an unstable game. It is maybe one of the least stable things that we play against because there's a couple of major things. So there's Pantheon of Woe, which the Void Dragon is like specifically like really good against guard because we're a bad leadership army. We're a leadership 7. So they're making us take, I don't remember if it has a -1 attached to it, but it's a -1 to hit. Like Void Dragon just points at something like that thing is -1 to hit. You take a leadership test, and then if you fail that leadership test, you're -1 to wound. It is not a battle shock test, which is really good because it would be a -2 to hit, but -1 to hit and sometimes -1 to wound just can cripple one of our tanks shooting at like a Catan. The other big thing is, of course, it is 4-up invalid to 5-up feel no pain. We're just rolling a lot of dice back and forth at each other, and the math is like okay. We can kill 2 Catan in a turn, but we probably don't. We're probably killing about 1.5 Catan in a turn, and any chip damage we do just gets ignored. Like we have to full to dead a Catan every single time we go in, and we get scammed by invulns, and sometimes we get scammed by shot count rolls, and sometimes they get scammed by invulns, and sometimes they get scammed by shot count rolls. So it's a really, really unstable game. Whether or not it's good, like there's a lot of different Necron builds right now. Awakened Dynasty, with 20 warriors, is something that is just really tough for us to deal with because the 20 warriors are a unit where if they have the Royal Warden, and they have fallback shoot and charge, we don't have great answers to because we never really, if we could activate every single one of our units into a 20 warrior brick, we would kill it easy. However, good players or even above average players do not let us activate more than like 1 or 2 activations into a warrior brick. And sometimes it's stealth, and sometimes it has armor of contempt, and sometimes it has bonus AP, and sometimes it has fallback shoot and charge. So if it doesn't have fallback shoot and charge, we can charge like a chimera into it and just go like, hey, what's up? You can't do anything with this unit for a turn. However, it's also just a lot of OC that we have to deal with. And then the other big thing about this matchup is that Doomsday Arcs are kind of fake against us. Um, One of the funniest things, I played up against Steven Ross on Wargames Live a couple months ago at this point, and over his first like 5 Doomsday Arc activations, I think I took like 12 damage total. And then on like his 6th or 7th Doomsday Arc activation, he did 28 damage. But most of the time, if you pop smoke and they're not in like the Silent King aura, or even if they are in the Silent King aura, you're taking probably 4 damage, maybe 8, which is like not nothing. But at that point, it means that you're probably needing all 3 Doomsayers to be shooting at the same Rogel Dorn in order to get any of these kills that we're trying to go for. So as long as you pop smoke, Chimeras should be living against Doomsayers. Dorn should be living against Doomsayers. Leman Russes are living. So it really ends up becoming a spot where they don't do that much damage to us, and we can oftentimes wail on them for multiple turns. That said, I I think we are ever so slightly favored into them. But if we're putting other stuff, okay, so if we're putting stuff like Drukhari and Deathwatch below the halfway mark, I think we also have to put Necrons into them. Slightly worse than like an even matchup. I think most 3-2 players playing against other 3-2 players against Necrons are going to have like a tougher time. And then it's just really unstable. Sometimes we kill them, but most of the time we kind of don't. And I think we have to. I think most average boards are going to have real trouble playing into Necrons. Okay, we are almost done, gamers. Let's go ahead and go to Orks. Orks is an army that is very much based on what the tempo is like in the game, right? Are we playing on their side of the board? Yes, we're winning. Are they playing on our side of the board? Uh-oh, we are now in a spot where we actually really have to play against them. Orks, in general, have profiles that are easy for us to kill because being T5 with a T-shirt means that even our lasguns are going to be relatively important because they're going to be failing most of the saves that we hand them with lasguns. Um, and a lot of their shooting, like their tank bustas, are not going to be super efficient into like our Dorns or our Leman Russes. They're actually pretty darn efficient into like Chimeras. But like the boys unit, I guess the big thing here is like, can most 3-2 players deal with another 3-2 player's gas break? Because the gas break is oftentimes going to be accompanied by whatever mech it is that lets them go through units. So they basically have the fly keyword. And it's 20 dudes, which whatever it touches kind of evaporates. I think most 3-2 players know how to deal with that. Um, and then they have like some commandos and some storm boys and maybe a flashgate unit. Yeah. I don't know. I think most of the time this is going to be, it's definitely easier for us than World Eaters. Um how stable is it? I think it's more stable. I think it's probably going to be about here. It's the kind of thing where if they call their wall turn and they roll like straight sixes on all of their advances, it gets weird. But most of the time, like if we go first, we have a lot of control over when they call the wall. We have really good profiles into them, and we have enough things. Like Storm Boys are not going to be killing a Chimera. Um, so they're really going to actually have to, like, even a Beast Boss unit maybe doesn't kill a Chimera, and if it does, it just tags the guys inside, and then that dies, but then we just create another screen with our Kazarkin immediately after that. So it's really not hard for us to create waves and waves of screens and just kill them over and over again with really efficient profiles. So as long as we're controlling the pace of the game, we're going to be in a pretty good spot. Okay, next, Eldar. Eldar is an army that is a far cry from what it once was. So the fact that fire dragons have kind of left the meta in real ways, and they have moved off of aspect host and war host rather considerably. They're mostly playing with like the Harlequins, but that army cannot deal with transports at all. Um, they just don't have. They just can't consistently kill a transport, so they can't consistently get to the meat inside. So they end up trading like 100, 200 point units for chimeras, and then they die. Um, and that's more or less like how the matchup goes. It's kind of how the matchup into Eldar has gone quite a bit. They have to really overcommit to kill our transports. Um, and when they do that, they end up losing more. They often are trading like 2 units for our 2 units, but their 2 units are more expensive than ours, and so that ends up being a pretty darn good thing. And the one unit that we really, really need to be careful of in this matchup is Lycus. And if Lycus with 5 warp spiders, they move 24 and can't be overwatched, or 26 and can be overwatched, that unit is spooky because it'll usually trade for 3 units, right? You'll trade, you'll flame things, or you'll do a bunch of flamers into one thing, then you'll charge a second thing, and then you probably kill that thing, or even if you don't kill that thing, when it falls back, you can usually overwatch it as well. So you're going to get 2 units and then oftentimes a third on the overwatch. And if it gets to do more than that, uh, it's a huge problem. But if it doesn't get to do more than that, then we're going to be in a pretty good spot overall. I think in general, Eldar is a matchup that even when Eldar was at its best, was not particularly difficult for us. Um, I think Bulgrin builds are generally going to struggle a little bit more because Bulgrin, mm, I guess they really struggle to kill Bulgrin as well. They don't have like great profiles. Like Jane Czar and friends don't really kill Bulgrin super effectively. The Warp Spiders are okay, but it's doing a lot of wounding on 5s. Um, Sweeping Hawks are like okay into them. I don't know. I think in general, it's definitely a favored matchup, and I don't think they have a ton of tools in order to like make it significantly better. So we're gonna go ahead and put Eldar here. It is decent for us, and it's fairly stable. There's not a ton of obvious ways for the Elder to come back into it. Okay, Tau. Tau's an interesting one. So Tau is mostly being piloted in Montka right now, where it generally has like greater activations into us than we do into them. They just have more things. They have a lot of cheap things, especially since people have been dropping a lot of stealth suits. They've oftentimes been going down to 1 stealth suit, and the big thing here is that they can outrange us, and then they can also jail us really effectively. So one of the big things about the Monka Tau is as soon as the Doran kills something, they'll be like, cool, I'm now going to full reroll hits against that Rogel Doran for the rest of the game. And those rerolls with lethal hits can be really, really scary for us to deal with because it's just so much consistency and it's a ton of extra damage that's going to be going into our Rogel Thorns. That said, it becomes a really weird game of trying to kill their stuff with stuff that we are expecting to lose anyway, right? Or making the Rogel Dorn shoot in a position where it's going to be really hard to shoot us back. And if we aren't getting our Dorn shot on turns 2 and 3, we are very much in a position where they're going to kind of struggle to deal with it once they lose the lethal hits, even with the full hit rerolls, because they don't have the a ton of extra effective damage, especially on turns 4 and 5. So this is one that oftentimes becomes very much a it's kind of like a game of cat and mouse, and both sides are really trying to find spots where we can kill stuff without trading it back because we both have a fair amount of trash. We both have long range shooting. Their long range shooting is better than our long range shooting, but our medium range shooting is far superior to their medium range shooting. So it's generally the kind of matchup where we have the tools to play against them, but it's not necessarily going to be the easiest thing. And especially if they go first, they have a lot of infiltrate. Pathfinders are a really good data sheet for infiltrate, and they're kind of like budget Kazarkin in a lot of ways because they just go up, they're going to kill like 5 Marines, or they're going to do some serious damage to like a cultist unit or 10 guardsmen. And then they're either going to like nuisance charge something, or they're going to stand 1 inch in front of something so that people can't go touch objectives that way. Because of that, I actually think that Tau, again, I think it's very drawish for us still, in general. But how stable is it? I think it's fairly stable. I'm going to go ahead and put it. I actually think it's slightly harder for us than the Ultramarines matchup. Um, I don't think it's quite as difficult for us as the Drukhari matchup because I do think it is not the hardest thing in the world to pilot. So I'm going to go ahead and end up putting Tau. It's a little bit, it's a little bit harder than some of the other matchups that we have, but it's not. Realistically, I do think this is probably like right about the line, but again, we are stretching it. Basically everything would be like right around this blue, or like slightly outside of it. We will stretch it a little bit just so we have a bit more space there. Okay. Lastly, Leagues of Votann. So Leagues of Votann, you mostly see there's a couple of builds. There's like the Need Guard, like 2 land for, and then some Ironkin Steeljacks, maybe some Hearthguard. You have the Hearthband, which is usually like 3 units of Hearthguard Terminators, and then you have the Delve Assault, which is just a lot of Berserks. And against Hearthband and Need Guard, I think it's fairly stable, so it's probably like here. I need to let it go. I think it's pretty stable, so it's definitely going to be on the right side. And I think Delve Assault is slightly less stable, so I'll move it a little bit, kind of in line with Tau. I do think Need Guard and Hearthband are matchups that are hard to lose in a singles environment, um, but they're not necessarily going to be like big wins. And I think Delve Assault, I need to play that matchup again because I didn't really understand what it was doing, but I think if I were to play it another time, I would have a better time. I think Votann, which I'm going to bring to the front for a moment, probably goes here. And then let's see. Probably right about here. I think it's relatively stable. Neither side is particularly good at pushing. I think Hearthband and Delvasar are a little bit better at pushing because they can just choose to take relatively long charges. But that's about it. And I think that's it. I think those are all of the factions that are currently in the game. You can kind of see there's like there's like a couple. In general, the matchups where they are less stable tend to be not as good for us because of that instability. But the big thing is you have this really big clustering of realistically, again, everything here everything that is not in the blue would probably be pushed towards the top right. Everything should be pushed a little bit towards the top right. I was trying to make it a little bit more open so that everybody can see it. Um, so with that in mind, I'm kind of trusting Nassim and a couple of the other British players in particular about this Custodes one, that it's the worst matchup for guard in the game. I do need to get some games into it relatively soon. And then let's see, with everything else that I've currently set up, um, I'm going to leave Custodes alone, and I'm going to move Gene Steer Colts a touch up. I do think it's still a relatively unstable matchup, especially into Biosanctic. I think the others are definitely more stable, but the Biosanctic is the one that scares me the most. And then, yeah, this feels about right. I think for most 3-2 players, yeah, for most 3-2 players, I think Space Wolves is a little bit harder than that. And then Orks. Orks is just kind of struggling right now. Partly, I don't think they have the worst matchup into us. Push them down just a touch here, kind of overlapping with Tyranids. And I think in general, I think I'm pretty happy with how this has ended up. Anyway, this is just a lot of stuff on a board. So if you are struggling to see things, again, we have Chaos Knights, Death Guard, Grey Knights, Imperial Knights hiding behind the Grey Knights. This pink Chaos Space Marines is Emperor's Children. Normal Chaos Space Marines right beneath it. Eldar, Votann, Blood Angels, Adeptus Mechanicus, Drukhari, Tau, Space Marines, Black Templars, Thousand Suns, Dark Angels, Tyranids, Orks, Sisters, World Eaters, Space Wolves, Demons, Deathwatch, Custodes, Joushi Cults, and Necrons. So anyway, this was just me. This was me procrastinating on actually going back to applying for jobs. So if you are interested in seeing more of this kind of content, let me know down in the comments below. Other than that, I do still have a lot of time available for coaching. So if that's something you're interested in and there's some of these matchups that you're trying to become better at, let me know. That's something that I can work with you with as well. Also consider becoming a member of the channel, joining the Discord, blah, 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 all that good stuff. Thank you guys so much for listening to me ramble for the past hour and a bit. I'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.